For years, there has been one claim Donald Trump has repeated again and again, that he's a genius. On television, at rallies, in interviews, and across social media, the message has always sounded the same. He's smarter than the critics, smarter than the politicians around him, smarter than the media questioning him. Over time, that idea became part of the brand. Supporters repeated it. Critics mocked it. But one thing stayed consistent: the claim was never really challenged with proof. Until Jasmine Crockett stepped into the conversation. For weeks leading up to this moment, the tension had been building online. Trump had been firing off familiar attacks, labeling critics as low IQ and daring them to take intelligence tests. Crockett was one of the names thrown into that mix. But instead of responding immediately, she stayed quiet. No back and forth posts, no heated replies. She waited. And when she finally responded, it wasn't through a tweet. It was on a stage where everyone could see it happen in real time. The setting looked simple at first. A late-night television studio. Bright lights. Cameras rolling. The audience buzzing with anticipation. The host welcomed Crockett with a relaxed tone, the kind that usually signals a light conversation. But the moment she sat down, it was clear something different was about to unfold. Crockett placed a folder on the desk in front of her. Not dramatically. Not for show. Just a quiet gesture that immediately caught the attention of the audience. The host leaned forward slightly and joked about the folder, asking if she had brought receipts. Crockett smiled politely but didn't rush to explain. Instead, she let the moment breathe. The audience could feel it, something inside that folder mattered. For years, Trump had used intelligence as a kind of rhetorical weapon. Calling opponents low IQ had become one of his favorite lines. It was meant to humiliate, to dominate the conversation before it even began. But Crockett approached the issue from a completely different angle. Instead of trading insults, she talked about evidence. She explained calmly that political arguments should be based on facts, not labels. If someone repeatedly claims to be intellectually superior, she said, then eventually the question becomes simple: where's the proof? The room grew quieter. The host leaned in again, curiosity replacing humor. So what exactly is in that folder? He asked. Crockett opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No dramatic graphics. No flashy presentation. Just a document with a number printed on it, the kind of number that had fueled Trump's reputation for years but had never been publicly verified. The audience waited. Crockett held the paper for a moment before speaking again. She explained that for decades, Trump had suggested his intelligence was extraordinary. The narrative had grown so large that people rarely questioned it anymore, but narratives, she said, are not the same as facts. Then she confirmed what was written on the page. The number wasn't shocking. It wasn't disastrous. It wasn't even particularly remarkable. It was ordinary. Completely average. For a moment, the room didn't react. The audience seemed to process what they had just heard. After years of hearing about unmatched brilliance, the reality sounded surprisingly normal. Then the whispers began. The host removed his glasses and stared at the page, clearly surprised by the simplicity of it all. Not because the number itself was unusual, but because the myth surrounding it had been so much bigger. Crockett didn't celebrate the moment. Instead, she explained why it mattered. The problem wasn't the score, she said. There's nothing wrong with being average. Millions of people are average, and intelligence can't be reduced to a single number anyway. The real issue was the narrative that had been built around it. For years, that narrative had been used to dismiss critics and silence opponents. Calling someone low IQ wasn't just an insult, it was a strategy meant to shut down debate before it even started. But when evidence enters the conversation, the strategy stops working. The audience began applauding, not because of the number, but because of the contrast. Crockett had dismantled the myth without raising her voice, without mocking anyone, and without turning the moment into a personal attack. She simply showed the facts. And in politics, facts can be more disruptive than insults. Backstage and online, reactions were already spreading. Clips from the moment started circulating across social media almost immediately. Commentators debated whether the revelation mattered, while others focused on the broader point Crockett was making about accountability. Meanwhile, the story took on a life of its own. People weren't just talking about intelligence tests anymore. They were talking about political narratives, how they're built, how they spread, and how rarely they're challenged with evidence. Back in the studio, Crockett closed the folder. Her tone remained calm as she addressed the camera directly. "Disagreement is part of democracy," she said. "Debate is necessary. But belittling people isn't leadership." The audience responded with another round of applause. She continued by explaining that intelligence isn't measured by how loudly someone claims to have it. It's measured by discipline, focus, and the ability to engage with facts even when those facts challenge your own story. The host leaned back in his chair, shaking his head slightly in disbelief. "Then why all the anger about it?" he asked quietly. The audience laughed, but the question carried a deeper point. If the number truly didn't matter, why had it been used as a weapon for so long? Crockett didn't answer with another accusation. She simply repeated the principle that had guided the entire moment: accountability matters. When leaders make claims, those claims eventually deserve proof. By the time the segment ended, the conversation had shifted completely. The original topic had been intelligence, but the real subject had become credibility. By the next morning, clips from the exchange were everywhere. Some commentators called it a political stunt. Others called it a masterclass in composure. But regardless of where people stood, one thing was clear: the moment had struck a nerve. Not because it was loud. Not because it was chaotic. But because it was quiet, methodical, and impossible to ignore. In the end, the biggest surprise wasn't the number on that sheet of paper. It was how easily a decades-old narrative unraveled when someone finally asked for proof. And sometimes, that's all it takes. Not shouting. Not insults. Just one calm moment, one open folder, and the willingness to let the facts speak for themselves.